A dead girl walks in a Duke's house, and he recognizes the scar. 5 years ago, Duke Adrian Vale buried the only woman he ever loved. He visited her grave every week, leaving white roses on cold stone. But this morning, in the frozen corridors of his own estate, he sees a servant scrubbing floors, and she bears a crescent-shaped scar he would recognize anywhere. The girl declared dead is alive, and she's been invisible inside his house for 3 years. Stay until the end to see how a duke wages war against those who erased her. Like this video and comment which city you're watching from. The first light of dawn crept through the tall windows of Blackthorn Hall like an unwelcome guest, cold and gray. Duke Adrian Vale moved through the eastern corridor with the measured stride of a man who had long ago learned to carry grief like a second skin. He was 31 years old, though his eyes held the weariness of someone much older. He barely noticed the servants anymore. They were part of the architecture, necessary, invisible, efficient. This morning was no different, or so he thought. A figure knelt on the stone floor ahead, scrubbing in small, methodical circles. The bucket beside her steamed faintly in the frigid air. Adrian's boots echoed as he approached, and the girl, no, woman, pressed herself flatter against the floor, making herself as small as possible. He would have walked past entirely, but then he saw her wrist. Adrian stopped so abruptly that his coat swung forward. The woman's sleeve had ridden up as she worked, exposing pale skin and a small crescent-shaped scar just below her left wrist bone. A scar from a fall she'd taken when she was 14, climbing a tree she'd been told was too dangerous. A scar he had bandaged himself with strips torn from his own shirt while she laughed through tears. A scar that should have been buried in the ground for 5 years. The world tilted. "Look at me." His voice came out rougher than he intended. The woman froze, her hand still gripping the wet brush. She kept her head down. "I said, look at me." Adrian's heart hammered against his ribs. "Now." Slowly, painfully, she raised her face. The breath left his body, those eyes, storm gray with flecks of amber, too intelligent for their own good, once bright with defiance and curiosity. Now they were dull, haunted, framed by exhaustion and something worse, resignation. But they were hers. "No," he whispered. "No, you're dead. I buried you." The woman's lips parted, then closed. Her hands trembled. She looked like she might shatter. "Your Grace," she said quietly, and even her voice, rougher, more careful, but unmistakably hers, cut through him like a blade. "I should finish. Elena." The name hung in the air between them like a ghost made solid. She flinched as though he'd struck her. Her face went white. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then her eyes filled with something that looked like terror. "My name is Lena Marsh, Your Grace," she said mechanically. "I'm a housemaid. I should return to my duties." "Stop!" Adrian's hand shot out and caught her wrist, the scarred one, with a gentleness that contradicted the command in his voice. "Stop lying! I know you! I know you!" Elena, because it was Elena, it had to be Elena, went rigid under his touch. Tears spilled over her cheeks, silent and damning. "Please," she breathed. "Please don't. They'll send me away. I have nowhere else to go." The words hit him like a physical blow. "Send you—" Adrian's voice cracked. "Elena, I mourned you. For 5 years. I visited your grave every week. He couldn't finish. His throat had closed. She was shaking now, violent tremors running through her thin frame. She looked half-starved, her clothes threadbare, her hands raw and reddened from years of brutal work. "How?" he managed. "How are you alive?" Elena's breathing came fast and shallow. She glanced down the corridor as though expecting someone to appear and drag her away. "Not here," she whispered. "Please. If anyone sees—" Adrian made a decision in an instant. "Come with me." He released her wrist and stood, stripping off his heavy winter coat and draping it over her shoulders before she could protest. "Now!" "Your Grace, I can't— "That's an order, Miss Marsh," he said, loud enough for anyone who might be listening, then quieter. "Trust me. One more time. Please." Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, memory, a ghost of the girl she'd been. After a heartbeat, she nodded. Adrian led her through the corridors of Blackthorn Hall, taking servants' passages and side stairs he rarely used. Staff members they passed flattened themselves against walls, eyes downcast. None dared question why the Duke was escorting a housemaid through the private wings of the estate. He brought her to his personal study, a room few were permitted to enter, and locked the door behind them. Elena stood in the center of the room, drowning in his coat, looking utterly lost. She stared at the walls of books, the massive desk, the fire crackling in the hearth, as though she'd stumbled into a dream. "Sit," Adrian said gently, gesturing to the chair nearest the fire. She didn't move. "Elena, please sit." "I'll dirty the furniture," she said automatically, and the trained submission in her voice made him want to tear the world apart. "I don't give a damn about the furniture. Sit." She sat, perching on the very edge of the chair like a bird ready to flee. Adrian poured brandy with shaking hands, brought the glass to her and pressed it into her cold fingers. "Drink." She obeyed, coughing slightly at the burn. Some color returned to her face. Adrian pulled another chair closer than propriety allowed, and sat facing her. Now, in better light, he could see everything, the way her cheekbones stood out too sharply, the shadows under her eyes, the small scars on her hands from burns and cuts, the way she held herself like someone who had learned to expect pain. "Tell me everything," he said quietly. "Start from the beginning, please." Elena stared into the brandy glass. For a long time, she didn't speak. Adrian waited, even though every second of silence felt like agony. Finally, she began. "My father was always ambitious," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "After my mother died, he remarried quickly. Marguerite Sinclair. She was beautiful, connected, and she had 2 daughters from her first marriage." Adrian remembered. He'd met Elena's stepmother exactly once, years ago. A cold woman with calculating eyes and a smile that never reached them. "At first it wasn't terrible," Elena continued. "I stayed out of their way. I spent time with you and my books, and I thought if I could just survive until I came of age, I could leave. Make my own life." Her hands tightened around the glass. "But my father's investments failed, one after another. Shipping ventures that sank, land deals that fell through, loans called in. Within 2 years, we were drowning in debt. Marguerite was displeased." The understatement was so bitter that Adrian's chest tightened. "She convinced my father that the solution was marriage. Her daughters needed to marry well, but that required money, dowries, clothes, social seasons in the capital. Money we didn't have." "And you were in the way," Adrian said, understanding beginning to dawn like a nightmare. Elena nodded. "I was the legitimate daughter. I had a small inheritance from my mother's family, not much, but enough. And my father's title, when he died, was supposed to pass through me if there were no sons. Your stepmother wanted you gone." "She needed me gone," Elena corrected. "Dead, preferably, but that's difficult to arrange without questions. So she found another way." She took another sip of brandy, her hand steadier now, but her voice hollow. "They waited until you left for the capital. Do you remember? You had to attend Parliament. You promised you'd be back in 6 weeks. Adrian's throat constricted. "I promised I'd come back for you, that we'd—" He stopped. "I remember. 3 weeks after you left, I got sick, really sick. Fever, chills, delirium. The doctor came, but Marguerite sent him away before he could treat me properly. She kept me locked in my room, told the staff I was contagious, and no one was to enter." Elena's voice remained eerily calm, as though she were recounting someone else's story. "I thought I was dying. Maybe I wanted to, but one night I woke up and heard them talking in the hallway, Marguerite and my father. She'd found a merchant who dealt in human transactions, indentures. He would pay for a young woman of good breeding to work in a gentleman's household, no questions asked, enough to cover one daughter's dowry." Adrian's hands curled into fists. "Your father sold you." "He let her sell me," Elena said quietly. "There's a difference. He stood in the hallway and said nothing while she made arrangements for my death." "Your death," Adrian repeated numbly. "The fever was real, but it wasn't fatal. Marguerite bribed the doctor to sign a death certificate. They held a small funeral. I heard about it later from the merchant's wife, who thought it was amusing. They buried a coffin full of stones. Your black-edged letter arrived the day after the funeral. Adrian closed his eyes, remembering. The letter had been brief, formal, cold. The lady Elena Hartwell has succumbed to fever. Services were held privately. The family requests no visitors during their time of grief. He'd returned immediately, writing for 3 days straight. When he arrived at Hartwell Manor, the servants turned him away at the gate. By the time he convinced the local vicar to let him see the grave, Elena had been buried for a week. He'd knelt in the mud and wept like a child. "Where did they send you?" he asked, his voice raw. Elena looked into the fire. "First to a factory in the eastern provinces. I was 16. I didn't understand what was happening until the merchant's men locked us in wagons. There were 6 other girls. 2 of them were younger than me." Adrian felt sick. "I lasted 4 months in the factory before I collapsed. Malnutrition, they said. The merchant sold me to a private household, a magistrate who needed kitchen staff. That was better. I learned to scrub pots, clean floors, stay invisible. I survived." She said the word survived like it was an accomplishment and a curse. "I worked in 4 different houses over 3 years. Each time I was sold, I lost a little more of who I'd been. Elena Hartwell died that summer. I became Lena Marsh. No family, no history, nothing. Just hands that could work. And then?" Adrian's voice was barely audible. "And then, 3 years ago, the last household I worked for went bankrupt. Their staff was sold to pay creditors. The buyer was your head housekeeper, Mrs. Copeland. She was hiring for Blackthorn Hall. The room spun. "You've been here," Adrian said slowly. "In my house. For 3 years. Yes. Working as a servant while I—" He couldn't say it. While he mourned her. While he visited her empty grave. While he lived in the same building where she scrubbed floors before dawn. "I didn't think you'd recognize me," Elena said quietly. "I'm not the same person, and you never looked at servants. No one does. We're invisible." "I saw you," Adrian said fiercely. "Just now. I saw your scar and I knew." "One chance encounter in 5 years?" Elena's smile was bitter. "I was assigned to the East Wing because I'm quiet and thorough. You never use that wing. This morning was the first time we've been in the same corridor since I arrived." The coincidence of it, the sheer, terrible luck, made Adrian want to laugh and scream in equal measure. "Why didn't you tell me?" he demanded. "Why didn't you—" "Tell you what?" Elena's eyes flashed with something like her old spirit. "That I'm alive? That your childhood sweetheart is a purchased servant in your household? What would you have done, Adrian? You're a duke. I'm property." "You're not—" "I am," she cut him off. "Legally, I was sold. Multiple times. I have no papers, no family, no identity. Lena Marsh exists because Elena Hartwell is dead. If I'd told you who I was, even if you believed me, what then? You can't unmarry the past 5 years. You can't undo what they did." "I can damn well try," Adrian said roughly. Elena shook her head. "The moment anyone knows who I am, it becomes a scandal. A duke harboring his supposedly dead lover as a servant? The gossip alone would destroy you, and Marguerite would make sure the story became something ugly. She's good at that." "I don't care about gossip." "You should." Elena's voice hardened. "You have responsibilities. A duchy. People who depend on you. I won't let you throw that away for someone who doesn't even exist anymore." Adrian leaned forward, close enough that she had to meet his eyes. "You exist," he said with quiet intensity. "You're sitting here. You're breathing. Your heart is beating. You exist, Elena." Tears spilled down her face again. "I don't know how to be her anymore," she whispered. "I don't know how to be anything but this." Adrian reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he took her scarred, work-roughened hands in his. "Then we'll figure it out," he said, "together. But I'm not letting you go back to scrubbing floors. I'm not letting you disappear again. Do you understand?" Elena looked at their joined hands for a long moment. "They'll come for me," she said finally. "If anyone finds out, Marguerite will make sure I disappear permanently this time. She's already committed fraud, forgery, and human trafficking. What's one more murder? Let her try. Adrian's voice went cold in a way that would have made his enemies in Parliament step back. I'm not a heartbroken 26-year-old boy anymore, Elena. I'm one of the richest men in the country, and I have friends in very high places. If your stepmother wants a war, I'll give her one she can't survive. Something shifted in Elena's expression. Hope, maybe, fragile and uncertain. What are you going to do? She asked. Adrian stood, still holding her hands, and pulled her gently to her feet. First, he said, I'm going to make sure you're safe. You're not going back to the servants' quarters. I'll have Mrs. Copeland prepare a guest room in the private wing, under the name Lena Marsh, if you prefer. You'll say you're a distant cousin recovering from illness. No one will question it. Adrian, second, I'm going to have my doctor examine you. No arguments, he added, when she opened her mouth to protest. You're underweight and exhausted, and I need to know you're all right. Elena's chin lifted slightly, a flash of defiance that made his heart ache. And third? She asked. Adrian's expression went hard. Third, I'm going to find out exactly what your father and stepmother did. Every detail, every forged document, every bribe, every person who helped them erase you. Why? He met her eyes. Because they took 5 years from us, he said quietly. Because they made me mourn you while you suffered. Because they tried to unmake you. He stepped closer. And because I made you a promise once, under an oak tree when we were young and stupid, and thought we could take on the world. Do you remember? Elena's breath caught. You said you'd come back for me. I did come back, Adrian said, and I'm not leaving again. This time, we're going to make sure that everyone who hurt you answers for it. A knock at the door made them both jump. Your Grace? Mrs. Copeland's voice came through the heavy wood. Forgive the interruption, but Lord Winters has arrived for your morning appointment. Adrian squeezed Elena's hands once before releasing them. One moment, Mrs. Copeland, he called. Then to Elena. Do you trust me? She looked at him for a long time. Really looked, as though seeing him for the first time in years. I don't know, she said honestly. But I want to. That's enough, Adrian said. For now, that's enough. He crossed to the door, opened it a crack, and spoke quietly to his housekeeper. Mrs. Copeland's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded and disappeared. Adrian returned to Elena. She's preparing a room, he said. I've told her you're a distant relation who's been ill and needs rest and discretion. She's utterly loyal. She won't ask questions. What about the other servants? Let me worry about that. Adrian pulled a cord by the fireplace. Within moments, another knock came. Enter. A young footman stepped in, eyes carefully averted. Thomas, please escort Miss Marsh to the blue room. Make sure she has everything she needs. Clothes, toiletries, food. If she asks for anything, provide it immediately. Yes, Your Grace. Adrian turned back to Elena. She looked overwhelmed, lost. Go, he said gently. Rest, eat, let yourself breathe. I'll come find you this evening, and we'll talk more. Elena nodded slowly. She started toward the door, then stopped and looked back. Adrian? Yes? Thank you, she said quietly, for seeing me. The words cracked something open in his chest. I'll always see you, he said, even when the whole world tried to make you invisible. She left, following Thomas into the hallway. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Adrian stood alone in his study, staring at the chair where she'd sat, still struggling to process what had just happened. Elena was alive. She'd been in his house for 3 years. She'd been erased, sold, broken down, and forced to survive in ways he could barely imagine. And the people who did it had gotten away with it. Not anymore. Adrian crossed to his desk and pulled out a sheet of paper. He began writing names. Marguerite Hartwell, née Sinclair, Lord Edmund Hartwell. De Doctor, William Thorne. Merchant, name unknown, magistrate, location unknown. The list would grow. He would find every person who had touched Elena's false death, every hand that had signed a document or accepted a bribe or looked the other way. And then he would destroy them. But first, he needed information. Adrian pulled the bell cord again, harder this time. His secretary appeared within minutes. Marcus, Adrian said without preamble. I need you to send for 3 people immediately, my solicitor, my investigator, and my banker. Tell them it's urgent. I want them here by tomorrow morning. Marcus blinked. All 3, Your Grace. All 3. Also, send a messenger to the vicar at St. Catherine's in Hartwell Village. I want the death records for every burial in the last 10 years. May I ask what this is regarding? Adrian looked up, and something in his expression made Marcus take a step back. Someone tried to bury a living girl, Adrian said quietly. I'm going to dig up every secret they thought they'd hidden. Marcus swallowed and nodded. Right away, Your Grace. When the secretary left, Adrian returned to his list. He added more names, more questions, more lines of inquiry. 5 years. They'd stolen 5 years. He would take everything they had. Evening came cold and clear. Adrian found Elena in the blue room, sitting by the window in a borrowed dress that actually fit her. She'd bathed, and her hair, longer than he remembered, darker somehow, was pinned loosely back. She looked more like herself, but also utterly different. The doctor came, she said without looking away from the window. He says I need rest and better food. As if I didn't know. Adrian closed the door behind him. Did he? I'm fine, Elena cut him off. Malnourished, scarred, underweight, but fine. I've survived worse. The bitterness in her voice was new. Adrian sat in the chair across from her. Elena, stop calling me that, she said, finally turning to face him. Elena Hartwell died 5 years ago. Everyone knows it. There's a grave with her name on it. Then we'll dig up the grave, Adrian said calmly. We'll show it's empty. We'll prove what they did. Elena laughed, but there was no humor in it. And then what? We parade me through society as the risen dead? We tell everyone that a duke's childhood sweetheart was sold as a servant and he just happened to find her? Do you know what people would say? I don't care what... I care! Elena stood abruptly, pacing. I care because I know how this works now. I've spent 5 years listening to how the world really operates. The rich destroy the poor for sport. The powerful erase the weak because they can. And if you try to fight it, they'll destroy you too. Let them try. You don't understand. Elena turned on him, eyes blazing. I'm not the girl you knew. That girl was naive and stupid and thought love could survive anything. This version of me knows better. Adrian stood slowly, carefully. Then tell me. Help me understand what you've become. I'm a survivor, Elena said flatly. I learned to make myself small, to obey, to never question or fight back because fighting back gets you beaten or worse. I learned to swallow my pride, my anger, myself, because those things are luxuries servants can't afford. She held up her hands, showing him the scars and calluses. These hands scrubbed your floors, Adrian. They emptied your chamber pots. They washed your clothes. And you never knew because I was so good at being invisible that I erased myself. You didn't erase yourself, Adrian said quietly. They tried to erase you. There's a difference. Is there? Elena's voice cracked. Because I'm not sure I know who I am anymore. Adrian crossed the room in 3 strides and caught her hands, the same scarred hand she was showing him like evidence. You're the girl who climbed trees she wasn't supposed to climb, he said fiercely. The girl who read philosophy and argued with me about everything. The girl who had more courage in her little finger than most men have in their entire bodies. That's who you are. That girl is gone. No, Adrian said. She's standing right here, scared and angry and hurting, but still here, still breathing, still fighting. Tears streamed down Elena's face. I don't know how to fight anymore, she whispered. I only know how to survive. Then I'll fight for both of us, Adrian said, until you remember how. I'll fight and I'll win, and I'll make sure that everyone who hurt you pays for it. Elena looked up at him, searching his face. Why? She asked. Why does it matter so much? Adrian's hands tightened on hers. Because I love you, he said simply. I loved you 5 years ago under an oak tree. I loved you when I thought you were buried in the ground. And I love you now, standing here alive and broken and furious. That doesn't stop just because the world tried to destroy you. Elena made a small, broken sound. I don't know if I can love you back, she said. I don't know if I remember how. I know, Adrian said gently. And I don't need you to. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I just need you to let me help you. Let me make this right. She studied him for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Adrian pulled her into his arms, and Elena collapsed against him, shaking with silent sobs. He held her while she cried, for the girl she'd been, for the years she'd lost, for everything that had been taken from her. And while he held her, Adrian made a silent vow. He would find everyone who had touched her false death. He would gather evidence of every crime, every forgery, every moment of cruelty. And then he would show them what happened when someone tried to erase a girl a duke loved. They thought Elena was gone. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The investigator arrived before dawn. Adrian was already awake, had been for hours sitting in his study with cold coffee and a growing list of names. When Marcus knocked softly and announced Mr. James Thorne, Adrian waved him in without preamble. Thorne was a severe man in his 50s, graying at the temples, with eyes that missed nothing. He'd worked for Adrian's family for 2 decades, unearthing secrets that powerful people wanted buried. He set his leather case on the desk and waited. I need you to find a ghost, Adrian said without greeting. Thorne's eyebrow lifted slightly. Go on. 5 years ago, a girl named Elena Hartwell supposedly died of fever. There was a death certificate, a funeral, a burial. All of it was false. She was sold into domestic service instead. Thorne's expression didn't change, but he pulled out a notebook. You're certain? She's upstairs in the blue room, Adrian said flatly. I found her scrubbing my floors yesterday morning. She's been working in this house for 3 years. That got a reaction. Thorne's pen paused mid-stroke. The family? He asked. Lord Edmund Hartwell and his wife Marguerite, née Sinclair. 2 stepdaughters. The estate is Hartwell Manor, about 40 miles northeast of here. I want every record, financial, medical, legal. I want to know who the doctor was, who forged the documents, who bought her, and where she was sent. Every link in the chain, Thorne wrote quickly. Time frame? Start 5 years ago and work forward. And Thorne? Adrian leaned forward. Be discreet. If word reaches the Hartwell family that I'm investigating, they'll destroy whatever evidence remains. Understood. I'll need 3 days for the preliminary work. You have 2, Adrian said, and unlimited funds. Use whatever resources you need. Thorne nodded and left as quietly as he'd come. The solicitor arrived an hour later, a sharp woman named Catherine Winters, who'd helped Adrian navigate parliamentary politics for years. She listened to his explanation with increasing alarm. You realize what you're describing is fraud, forgery, and human trafficking, she said when he finished. These aren't civil matters, Your Grace. These are criminal charges. Good, Adrian said coldly. I want them prosecuted. Catherine set down her tea carefully. It won't be simple. The family could argue the girl consented, that she ran away, that the death was a misunderstanding. There's a grave with her name on it filled with stones, Adrian cut her off. There's a forged death certificate. There are witnesses who can testify she was sold. Can they? Catherine's gaze sharpened. Or will they? Servants who testify against their employers rarely work again. Doctors who admit to fraud lose their licenses. People protect themselves, Your Grace. Finding evidence is one thing. Finding people willing to speak is another. Adrian's jaw tightened. Then we make it worth their while. Offer immunity, protection, money, whatever it takes. And the girl herself? Is she willing to testify? The question landed like a stone. I haven't asked her yet, Adrian admitted. Catherine's expression softened slightly. You need to, because if this goes to trial, she'll be questioned, examined, judged. Every detail of the last 5 years will become public. She'll have to stand in front of strangers and recount her abuse. Are you prepared for that? Is she? Adrian closed his eyes briefly. He'd been so focused on vengeance that he hadn't fully considered what it would cost Elena. Talk to her, Catherine advised. Make sure she understands what justice will require. Then we'll discuss strategy. After she left, Adrian sat alone in his study, Catherine's words circling his mind like crows. He wanted to destroy the people who'd hurt Elena, wanted it with a ferocity that surprised him. But what if destroying them meant destroying her all over again? A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in." Elena entered, still wearing the borrowed dress from yesterday. She'd pulled her hair back severely, and the effect made her look older, harder. "Mrs. Copeland said you wanted to see me," she said, hovering near the door. "Sit, please." She crossed to the chair slowly, like someone approaching something dangerous. Adrian poured fresh tea and handed her a cup. "How did you sleep?" he asked. Elena's mouth twisted. "In a bed with clean sheets, in a warm room, with food in my stomach. I barely slept at all. It felt wrong." The admission cut him. "You'll get used to it again," he said gently. "Will I?" Elena met his eyes. "Or is this temporary? Am I a guest until you figure out what to do with me and then I go back to being invisible?" "No," Adrian said sharply. "Never. You're not going back to that life, Elena. I won't allow it." "You won't allow it," she repeated, and there was an edge to her voice. "As if I have no say in the matter." Adrian set down his cup carefully. "That's not what I meant." "Isn't it?" Elena stood, pacing to the window. "You're making decisions about my life without asking me, calling doctors, summoning lawyers, planning vengeance. It's kind, Adrian. It's generous. But it's still you deciding what happens to me." The words struck home because they were true. "You're right," Adrian said quietly. "I apologize. What do you want?" Elena turned to face him, and her expression was complex. Anger and fear and something that might have been hope. "I want them to pay," she said, voice low and fierce. "I want my father to know I survived. I want Marguerite to face what she did. I want everyone who touched my false death to answer for it. Then we'll make that happen. But I also want—" Elena's voice broke slightly. "I want to stop feeling like I'm waiting for the floor to collapse. Like this is all a dream and I'll wake up back in the scullery. I want to feel safe." Adrian crossed to her, slowly enough that she could step back if she wanted. She didn't. "You are safe," he said. "I swear it. Whatever happens next, you're protected here." "For how long?" Elena asked. "Until the scandal breaks? Until people start asking questions about the mysterious cousin who appeared from nowhere? Until someone recognizes me?" "No one will recognize you. You said it yourself. You're invisible." "I was invisible as a servant," Elena corrected. "Put me in a drawing room with society ladies, and someone will eventually remember Edmund Hartwell's daughter. And when they do, the questions will start." She was right, and Adrian knew it. They couldn't hide forever. "Then we control the narrative," he said. "We tell the truth on our terms." Elena laughed bitterly. "The truth? That I was declared dead and sold like livestock? That I scrubbed floors in the house of the man I was supposed to marry? That makes me a victim, Adrian. And victims don't get respect, they get pity. Or worse, they get blamed. Blamed for what? For not fighting back. For surviving instead of dying properly. For embarrassing important people with inconvenient truths." Elena's hands clenched. "I've listened to enough drawing room gossip in 5 years to know how this works. The scandal will be delicious for a few weeks, and then people will start wondering what I did to deserve it. Whether I was really innocent. Whether maybe I ran away and this is all an elaborate lie." Adrian's blood went cold because he could see it. The whispers, the speculation, the slow character assassination that society excelled at. "Not if we have proof," he said. "Not if we can show exactly what happened." "And then what?" Elena demanded. "I become the tragic girl everyone feels sorry for? I spend the rest of my life defined by what was done to me? That's not freedom, Adrian. That's just a different kind of cage." "What do you want then?" Adrian asked, frustration bleeding into his voice. "Tell me what you want, and I'll make it happen." Elena looked at him for a long moment. "I want to be the one who decides," she said finally. "Not you, not them, me. I want my choices to be mine." "Then choose," Adrian said. "Do we fight them, or do we let it go?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications. Elena turned back to the window, staring out at the grounds of Blackthorn Hall. Manicured gardens she'd maintained, paths she'd swept, a world she'd inhabited as a ghost. If we fight, she said slowly, it has to be total. No half measures, no mercy. Agreed. And I need to understand what it will cost, Elena continued. Your solicitor, Catherine Winters, she said I'd have to testify, tell my story in public, let people examine every degrading moment. She's worried about protecting you, Adrian said. But if it's too much, it is too much, Elena cut him off. But I'll do it anyway, because the alternative is letting them win, and I'm done letting them win. She turned to face him, and Adrian saw the girl he'd known 5 years ago flickering beneath the surface. Fierce, uncompromising, unwilling to bend. I want them ruined, Elena said quietly. Not just embarrassed, not just fined or censured. I want them destroyed the way they tried to destroy me. Can you do that? Adrian met her eyes. Yes, he said, but it won't be quick, and it won't be clean. We'll need evidence, witnesses, legal strategy. It could take months. I've survived 5 years, Elena said. I can survive a few more months. And when it's over, when they're ruined and you're free? Elena's expression shifted, became uncertain again. I don't know, she admitted. I haven't thought that far ahead. For 5 years, survival was the only goal. I don't know what comes after. Adrian wanted to tell her, wanted to say that after came them, a future where she wasn't afraid, where they could finish the story they'd started under an oak tree. But Catherine's warning echoed in his mind. Elena needed choices, not promises. Then we'll figure it out when we get there, he said instead. One step at a time. Elena nodded slowly. Where do we start? We start by building a case they can't escape. Well, over the next 3 days, Blackthorn Hall became a command center for quiet warfare. Thorne returned with preliminary findings that made Adrian's hands shake with rage. The doctor who'd signed Elena's death certificate, William Thorne, no relation, had been paid £200, a fortune for a country physician. He'd since moved to the capital and built a successful practice. The funeral had been conducted by a curate who'd been dismissed from his position a year later for gambling debts. The coffin had been supplied by a local carpenter who'd died 2 years ago, but his widow might remember the order. The financial records were even more damning. 6 weeks after Elena's supposed death, Marguerite Hartwell had paid off 3 major creditors. Her eldest daughter had received a new wardrobe worth over £500. The second daughter had been enrolled in an expensive finishing school. Follow the money, Thorne said, spreading papers across Adrian's desk. Lady Marguerite received a payment from a merchant named Cyrus Webb 3 weeks after the funeral. £800, far more than a servant's indenture should cost. Where's Webb now? Adrian demanded. Operating a labor house in the eastern provinces. I've sent inquiries, but quietly. If he suspects we're investigating, he'll destroy his records. Adrian stared at the documents, each one a piece of Elena's stolen life. What about Lord Hartwell? He asked. Thorne's expression darkened. Drowning in debt. He's mortgaged the estate 3 times over. The family is 1 bad season from bankruptcy. Good, Adrian said coldly. That makes them vulnerable. Catherine Winters had different concerns. She arrived that afternoon with a stack of legal precedents and a grim expression. The problem, she explained, spreading documents on the library table where she, Adrian, and Elena had gathered, is that human trafficking laws are complicated. If we can prove Elena was sold against her will, it's criminal. But if the family claims she consented to an indenture to pay family debts, it becomes a civil contract dispute. I was 16, Elena said sharply. I couldn't consent to anything. Legally, you could with your father's permission, Catherine said gently. I know it's wrong, but the law is specific. A guardian can contract a minor into service if it's presented as voluntary. Elena's face went white. So they can claim I agreed? They can try, Catherine said, which is why we need the death certificate. That's fraud regardless of your age. The burial of an empty coffin, the forged medical records, those are crimes with no legal defense. Can we prove the coffin was empty? Adrian asked. Catherine's pause was telling. We'd have to exhume it. The room went silent. You want to dig up my grave, Elena said flatly. It's the strongest evidence we have, Catherine said. If we can show the coffin contained stones instead of remains, It proves the death was fabricated. Everything else, the sale, the service, the years of abuse, becomes part of a larger criminal conspiracy. Elena stood abruptly and walked to the window. Adrian started to follow, but Catherine caught his arm. "Give her a moment," she murmured. They waited while Elena stared out at the grounds. When she finally turned back, her face was composed but pale. "Do it," she said. "Dig it up. Let everyone see what they buried." "Elena, you don't have to," Adrian began. "Yes, I do," she interrupted. "Because otherwise people will wonder. They'll think maybe I'm lying, maybe I'm confused. But if they see an empty coffin, they can't explain it away." Catherine nodded approvingly. "I'll petition for the exhumation. It will require a magistrate's order, which means the investigation becomes semi-public. Are you prepared for that?" "Is anyone ever prepared to watch their own grave opened?" Elena asked. "But I'll manage." Adrian wanted to pull her into his arms, to promise he'd protect her from all of it. But Elena's posture warned him off, shoulders back, chin up, every inch of her radiating brittle strength. "There's something else," Catherine said carefully. "Once we file for exhumation, the Hartwell family will know we're investigating. They'll have time to prepare a defense, destroy evidence, coach witnesses." "Let them try," Elena said. "We have the death certificate. We have the financial records. What can they destroy that we don't already have?" "Witnesses," Catherine said quietly. "People who could testify about what really happened. Servants who were there when you got sick, staff who saw you loaded into wagons, the merchant who sold you. All of them could disappear or change their stories if they're frightened enough." Adrian's mind raced. "Then we move faster. File for the exhumation immediately." While they're scrambling to respond, Thorne tracks down witnesses and secures their testimony. "It's risky," Catherine warned. "If we move too fast and miss something, we might not get a second chance." "If we move too slow, we give them time to cover their tracks," Adrian countered. "Better to strike while they're unprepared." Elena looked between them. "How long until the exhumation order comes through?" "A week, maybe 2, Catherine said. "Magistrates don't rush these things." "And then?" "Then we open the grave, document what's inside, and use it as the foundation for criminal charges. Fraud, conspiracy, human trafficking. We'll push for prosecution through the Crown courts." Elena absorbed this silently. "What if they run?" she asked. "My father and Marguerite. What if they flee before we can charge them?" Catherine and Adrian exchanged glances. "We could request they be detained," Catherine said slowly. "But that requires showing evidence of flight risk, and we're not there yet." "Then make sure we get there," Elena said. Her voice was ice. "I don't want them to escape. I want them to face what they did." "You'll have to face them too," Catherine reminded her gently. "In court. They'll be allowed to question you, challenge your story. It won't be easy." "Nothing about the last 5 years has been easy," Elena said. "I'll survive this too." After Catherine left to file the initial petitions, Adrian found Elena in the library pulling books from shelves seemingly at random. "What are you looking for?" he asked. "Legal precedents," she said without turning around. "Contract law, criminal proceedings, anything that might help." "Catherine is handling the legal strategy." "I know, but I need to understand it myself." Elena finally looked at him. "I spent 5 years having things done to me. I want to understand exactly how we're going to destroy them." Adrian moved closer. "You don't have to carry this alone." "Don't I?" Elena set down the book she was holding. "You're helping and I'm grateful. But at the end of the day, I'm the one who'll stand in court. I'm the one they'll try to discredit. I need to be ready." "Then let me help you prepare." Elena studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "All right. Tell me what happens after the exhumation." Adrian pulled 2 chairs close and began explaining the legal process, the evidence required, the burden of proof, the likely defenses the Hartwell family would mount. Elena listened intently, asking sharp questions that reminded him why he'd fallen in love with her in the first place. "They'll claim I ran away," she said, after he had outlined the prosecution strategy. "That I was rebellious, ungrateful, that I chose to leave. Your death certificate contradicts that. But what if they produce witnesses who say I was planning to run away, former servants who they've paid to lie?" "Then we discredit those witnesses," Adrian said. "Show they were bribed. show inconsistencies in their testimony. And if they claim you and I conspired to fake all this, that we're lovers staging an elaborate fraud to extort money? Adrian hadn't considered that angle. Why would we do that? Scandal, Elena said simply. Attention. Or maybe they'll claim I'm an imposter pretending to be Elena Hartwell to steal an inheritance. You have the scar. You know things only Elena would know. Scars can be made. Secrets can be learned. Elena's voice was matter-of-fact. I'm not saying it's true. I'm saying it's what they'll argue. We need to be ready. She was right, and the realization was both terrifying and impressive. In 5 years, Elena had learned to think like someone who expected attacks from every direction. Then we'll be ready, Adrian said firmly. For every argument they make, we'll have a counter-argument. For every witness they produce, we'll find 2 more. They destroyed your life once. We won't let them do it again. Elena's expression softened slightly. You really believe we can win this? I know we can, Adrian said, because we have something they don't. What's that? The truth. Elena's laugh was bitter. The truth hasn't helped me much so far. That's because the truth was buried, Adrian said, but we're digging it up now. And once it's out in the open, they won't be able to hide from it. A knock at the library door interrupted them. Marcus entered, looking troubled. Your Grace, there's a visitor at the gate. He says he's from Hartwell Manor. Adrian and Elena both went rigid. Who? Adrian demanded. He gave his name as Richard Cole. He claims to be Lord Hartwell's steward. Elena's face went pale. I know him. He helped Marguerite arrange everything. He's the one who contacted the merchant. Adrian's mind raced. Cole's appearance couldn't be coincidence, not 3 days after they'd started investigating. Does he know you're here? Adrian asked Elena quietly. I don't see how he could, unless someone at Hartwell Manor has connections to someone in my household, Adrian finished. It was unlikely but possible. Servants talked and information traveled. What should I do, Your Grace? Marcus asked. Adrian made a decision. Show him to the front sitting room. Offer refreshment. Tell him I'll be along shortly. After Marcus left, Adrian turned to Elena. Go to your room. Lock the door. Don't come out until I send for you. No, Elena said immediately. I want to hear what he has to say. Elena, he's come here for a reason, she interrupted. Either he knows something or he suspects something. Either way, I want to know what it is. If he sees you, he won't. But I can listen from the gallery. The front sitting room is directly below the music room. There's a ventilation grate in the floor. Elena's expression was determined. I used to dust it twice a week. The sound carries perfectly. Adrian wanted to argue, but he recognized the set of her jaw. Stay hidden, no matter what you hear. I will. Elena slipped out of the library while Adrian composed himself. Then he made his way to the front sitting room where Richard Cole waited. The man was in his 40s, well-dressed, but nervous, turning his hat in his hands. He stood when Adrian entered. Your Grace, thank you for seeing me on such short notice. Mr. Cole, Adrian didn't offer his hand. My steward said you come from Hartwell Manor. What business brings you to Blackthorn Hall? Cole shifted his weight. It's a delicate matter, Your Grace. I'm hoping we can speak frankly. By all means. Lord Hartwell has heard certain rumors, Cole began carefully. Rumors that you've been making inquiries about his family, about events that occurred several years ago. Adrian's expression remained neutral. I make many inquiries. I'm a duke with extensive business interests. You'll have to be more specific. Cole's discomfort increased. Specifically about the death of his daughter, Elena. The name hung in the air. Miss Hartwell died 5 years ago, Adrian said coldly. I attended her memorial. What possible interest could I have in events so long past? That's what Lord Hartwell would like to know. Cole met his eyes. He's concerned that old wounds are being reopened unnecessarily. Old wounds, Adrian repeated. What a delicate way to phrase it. Your Grace, I speak plainly. If there are questions about the circumstances of Miss Hartwell's death, perhaps those questions could be answered directly rather than through investigators and solicitors. So they knew about Thorne. That narrowed down the leak considerably. And if I have questions, Adrian said softly, why should I ask a family that has already proven themselves untrustworthy? Cole's face flushed. I don't know what you've been told. I know what I need to know, Adrian interrupted. The question is, why are you here? Did Lord Hartwell send you to threaten me, to offer a bribe, to determine how much I know? I came to offer an explanation, Cole said desperately. If there are misunderstandings about what happened 5 years ago, we can clarify them. There's no need for scandal or investigation. Clarify then, Adrian said. Explain to me how a healthy 16-year-old girl dies of fever and is buried within 2 days. Explain the convenient financial transactions that followed. Explain why Lord Hartwell's debts were suddenly paid. Cole's mouth opened and closed. I'm not privy to all the family's financial affairs. But you're privy to some of them, Adrian said. You were the steward. You kept the books. You would have recorded the payments. I can't discuss confidential family business, even when that business involves fraud and forgery? Cole went very still. Your Grace, I don't know what you think you've uncovered, but I assure you assure me of nothing, Adrian cut him off, because you're here to gauge what I know and report back to your employers. So let me make this very clear. I know what the Hartwell family did. I have evidence, and I will see justice done. Please, Cole said, and genuine fear entered his voice. Please, Your Grace, I'm just a steward. I follow orders. If there were irregularities, I had no choice. Everyone has choices, Mr. Cole. You made yours when you helped them. Cole sank into a chair without asking permission. If I tell you what really happened, will you grant me immunity? Above them, hidden in the music room, Elena pressed her face close to the ventilation grate and listened to the steward's confession with tears streaming down her face. That depends, Adrian said, on what you tell me. Cole's hand shook as he gripped his hat. The silence stretched between them like a blade waiting to fall. I need your word, the steward said finally. Your word as a duke that if I testify, I won't hang for it. Adrian's jaw tightened. I can't promise what the courts will do, but if you cooperate fully, I'll advocate for leniency. That's not good enough. It's all you're getting, Adrian said coldly. Because right now, you're complicit in fraud, forgery, and human trafficking. Those are hanging offenses, Mr. Cole. Your only chance is to tell the truth before someone else does. Above them, Elena dug her nails into her palms hard enough to draw blood. She recognized Cole's voice perfectly, the same measured tone he'd used when explaining to her father why selling a daughter was financially prudent. Cole took a shuddering breath. Lady Marguerite came to me 2 months after she married Lord Hartwell. She'd reviewed the estate books and was displeased. Because the family was bankrupt, Adrian said. Worse than bankrupt. Lord Hartwell had been borrowing against future income for years. The debts were enormous. Marguerite realized that unless something changed drastically, her daughters would have no prospects at all. So she decided to eliminate competition. Cole flinched. She viewed it as resource allocation. Elena's mother had left a trust, not large, but enough to matter. About £2,000 that would mature when Elena turned 18. Additionally, there was a clause in the marriage settlement that guaranteed a portion of the estate's income to any children from the first marriage. Adrian's stomach turned. She needed Elena gone to access the money. And to secure her own daughter's futures, Cole confirmed. She approached me with a proposal. If I helped arrange Elena's disappearance, I would receive 10% of the trust once it was released. £200, Adrian said. The exact amount you paid the doctor. Cole's face went gray. How did you... I know everything, Mr. Cole. The only question is whether you confirm it or I prove it without you. The steward's shoulders sagged. She planned it for months, waited until you left for Parliament because Elena would never have gone along with it while you were near. Then she convinced Lord Hartwell that Elena was becoming hysterical, threatening to embarrass the family, claiming she was secretly engaged to you. Elena's breath caught. That part was new. My father believed that? Adrian asked sharply. He believed what he wanted to believe, Cole said bitterly. That his daughter was ungrateful and dramatic, that removing her would solve all his problems. Marguerite is very persuasive. So he agreed to sell his own daughter. He agreed to an arranged placement, Cole corrected weakly. That's how Marguerite phrased it. She found a merchant named Cyrus Webb who specialized in supplying domestic labor to wealthy households. He paid £800 for Elena, triple the normal rate because of her breeding and education. Adrian's hands clenched into fists. And the death certificate? Dr. Thorne was in debt from gambling. Marguerite paid off his creditors in exchange for signing the certificate. Elena really was ill with fever, which made it easier. We kept her isolated while she was delirious, told the staff she was dangerously contagious. By the time she recovered enough to understand what was happening, the funeral was already arranged. Where was she during the funeral? Cole's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Locked in the wine cellar. Webb's men came for her that night. Above them, Elena pressed her hand over her mouth to stifle a sob. She remembered that cellar, cold stone, absolute darkness, the sound of footsteps and voices above as strangers mourned a girl who was very much alive and screaming for help. Adrian stood and walked to the window, not trusting himself to speak. When he finally turned back, his voice was ice. Who else knew? The doctor, the curate. Marguerite paid him £50 to perform the service quickly and quietly. The carpenter who made the coffin knew it was meant to be empty, but he's dead now, and the 2 footmen who helped transfer Elena to Webb's wagon. Their names: Thomas Crane and William Ashford. Marguerite dismissed them both within a month and paid them to leave the county. Find them, Adrian ordered. I want sworn statements from everyone involved. Cole nodded miserably. Is that all? No. Adrian leaned forward. Tell me about the merchant. Where did Webb take her? I don't know the specifics. He had contracts with several factories in the eastern provinces. After that, Cole spread his hands helplessly. I never asked. Marguerite didn't want to know either. As far as she was concerned, Elena simply ceased to exist. The casual cruelty of it, the willful ignorance, made Adrian want to put his fist through the wall. Get out, he said quietly. Your Grace. Get out before I forget I'm a gentleman, Adrian said, each word clipped. You'll receive a summons to testify. If you run, I will find you. If you warn the Hartwells, I will bury you. Do you understand? Cole fled. Adrian stood alone in the sitting room, trying to control his breathing. Above him, he heard a soft sound, footsteps moving quickly away from the music room. He found Elena in the library, standing at the window with her arms wrapped around herself. She didn't turn when he entered. You heard? He said quietly. Every word. Her voice was hollow. He talked about me like I was livestock, resource allocation, arranged placement, as if I were a chair being moved from one room to another. Adrian crossed to her but didn't touch her. Elena, my father stood upstairs while I screamed in the cellar, she said. During my own funeral, he heard me and did nothing. I'm sorry. Don't apologize for them. Elena finally turned and her eyes were dry but burning. I don't want sorry. I want them destroyed. We will destroy them, Adrian promised. Cole's testimony alone is enough to— It's not enough, Elena interrupted. One steward's word against a lord and lady? They'll claim he's lying, that you paid him to fabricate a story. We need more. She was right, and Adrian knew it. Thorne is tracking down the other witnesses. The footmen, the curate. Witnesses who were paid to lie before can be paid to lie again, Elena said. We need something they can't deny, something undeniable. The exhumation could take weeks, and it only proves the coffin is empty, not where I went or who arranged it. Elena's voice was sharp with frustration. Cole gave us the name of the merchant, Cyrus Webb. If we can get his records, we have direct proof of the sale. Webb operates labor houses in the eastern provinces. That's over 200 miles away. Then we go there, Elena said immediately. Adrian stared at her. You want to go back? I want evidence they can't destroy or deny. Webb kept records. He had to. Names, dates, payments. If we can get those ledgers, we have everything. It's too dangerous. If Webb is still operating, he'll have protection, guards. He won't just hand over incriminating documents. Then we don't ask, Elena said. We take them. Adrian recognized the determination in her voice, the same stubborn courage that had made her climb forbidden trees and read banned books. But this was different. This was dangerous. Elena, think about what you're suggesting. I've thought about nothing else for 5 years, she cut him off. Every day I thought about the people who put me there. Now I finally have a chance to prove what they did. I'm not letting that slip away. If Webb recognizes you, he won't. I was 16, sick, terrified. Now I'm 21 and angry. Besides, I doubt he remembers individual faces. We were just inventory to him. The casual way she said it made Adrian's chest ache. There has to be another way, he said. There isn't. Not if we want this to be fast and certain. Elena stepped closer. You said you'd fight for both of us. This is how we fight. We go to Webb's labor house, we get the records, and we bring them back as proof. And if we're caught? Then we face the consequences, Elena said simply. But I'd rather face consequences trying to win than sit here waiting for them to outmaneuver us. Adrian studied her face. The determination, the intelligence, the core of steel that 5 years of abuse hadn't broken. He knew he couldn't talk her out of this. More than that, he knew she was right. We'll need a plan, he said finally. We can't just walk in and demand his ledgers. Elena's smile was sharp. Then it's good that I spent 3 years learning to be invisible. They left 2 days later, traveling in an unmarked carriage with Thorne and 2 of Adrian's most trusted men. Adrian told his household staff he was inspecting northern properties. Elena wore simple traveling clothes and kept her hair covered. To anyone watching, they were a minor gentleman and his secretary on routine business. The journey took 4 days. They traveled through increasingly industrial landscapes, factories belching smoke, cramped workers' housing, the smell of coal and desperation. Elena watched it all with a carefully blank expression, but Adrian noticed how her hands clenched whenever they passed groups of thin, exhausted laborers. I worked in a place like that, she said quietly as they rolled past a textile mill. 14-hour days, they locked us in so we couldn't leave. Some girls were as young as 12. Adrian's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. What was there to say? They reached Ashford, the industrial town where Webb operated, on the 5th evening. Thorne had secured rooms at a modest inn under false names. That night, they reviewed what they knew. Webb runs 3 operations, Thorne explained, spreading a hand-drawn map on the table. 2 factories and 1 labor house where he keeps workers between placements. The labor house is here, on Millway Street. It's essentially a warehouse with dormitories. Security? Adrian asked. 2 guards during the day, 1 at night. The workers are locked in their rooms after sunset. Elena leaned over the map. Where does he keep his office? 2nd floor, western corner. That's where the records would be. So we need to get past the guards, into the building, up to the 2nd floor, find the right ledgers, and get out without being seen, Adrian summarized. That's impossible. Not if we have help from inside, Elena said. They all looked at her. The workers, she explained, they hate Webb. If we can convince even one of them to help us, we can get in. Why would they risk it? Thorne asked skeptically. Because they have nothing to lose, Elena said. I've been where they are. If someone had offered me a chance to strike back at the people who owned me, I would have taken it in a heartbeat. Adrian didn't like it. Too many variables, too much risk. But Elena was already formulating a plan. I'll go tomorrow, she said, dressed as a worker looking for placement. Webb always needs labor. He'll bring me in for an interview. While I'm inside, I can talk to the other women, find someone willing to help. Absolutely not, Adrian said immediately. It's the only way to make contact without raising suspicion. You're asking me to let you walk back into the exact situation we're trying to prove destroyed you? No. Elena's eyes flashed. I'm not asking permission, Adrian. I'm telling you the plan. Then the plan is rejected, Adrian said flatly. We'll find another way. There is no other way. Elena's voice rose. You can't walk in there. You're a duke, for heaven's sake. Even dressed down, you carry yourself like nobility. Thorne is too old, and your men too obviously guards. I'm the only one who can pass as someone desperate enough to work for Webb. She's right, Thorne said quietly. Adrian rounded on him. You can't seriously be agreeing to this. I'm saying her logic is sound, Thorne replied. Webb won't suspect someone actively seeking employment. And if she can identify a potential ally inside, and if Webb recognizes her, Adrian demanded, if something goes wrong, then you'll be watching, Elena said. You can position yourself nearby. If I don't come out within an hour, you intervene. That might be too late. It might be, Elena agreed, but I've survived worse odds, and this is too important to let fear stop us. Adrian wanted to forbid it outright, wanted to lock her in the inn-room and handle this himself. But he saw the set of her shoulders, the way her hands remained steady, even as she proposed walking back into her nightmare. I don't like this, he said. I know, Elena said softly, but you promised to let me choose. This is my choice. The next morning, Elena dressed in the plainest clothes they could find, a worn dress, a thin shawl, her hair pulled back severely. She looked like what she'd been 5 years ago, a girl with no options. Adrian wanted to hold her, to beg her not to do this. Instead, he placed a small knife in her hand. Keep this in your pocket, he said. If anything happens, I'll use it, Elena promised. She met his eyes. I'm not that helpless girl anymore, Adrian. I know how to fight now. She left before he could respond. Thorne and Adrian positioned themselves in a tavern across from Webb's labor house with a clear view of the entrance. Adrian watched Elena approach the building, knock, and be admitted by a guard. Then she disappeared inside. The minutes crawled by like hours. Inside the labor house, Elena fought to keep her breathing steady as memories crashed over her. The smell was the same. Unwashed bodies, cheap soap, desperation. The guard who'd admitted her barely looked at her before pointing to a bench. Wait there. Mr. Webb sees applicants at noon. Elena sat, hands folded in her lap, and studied her surroundings. The front hall was clean but stark. Through a doorway, she could see a large room where perhaps 20 women worked at sewing machines. Another door led to what looked like dormitories. A girl, perhaps 15, emerged from the workroom carrying a basket of thread. She moved with the careful, economical motion of someone who'd learned not to waste energy. When she saw Elena, her eyes widened slightly. New applicant? She whispered. Elena nodded. Do you work here? The girl's laugh was bitter. Work. That's one word for it. She glanced back at the workroom. Don't come here if you have any other choice. Webb works you until you drop and pays barely enough to cover your bed. I don't have another choice, Elena said, which was true enough. How long have you been here? 2 years, since my parents sold my indenture to pay debts. The girl's voice was flat, reciting facts. I'm here until I'm 18. Then maybe I can find real work. Elena's heart clenched. Does Webb keep records of all the people who come through? The girl looked at her strangely. Why? I'm looking for someone, Elena said carefully. A friend who was placed through here years ago. I thought maybe if I could see the records, I could find out where she went. Webb keeps everything locked in his office. No one's allowed up there except him and his clerk. The girl hesitated. But the clerk is new. Started last month. The old one died of consumption. An opportunity, maybe. What's the new clerk like? Elena asked. Young? Nervous? I think Webb frightens him. The girl glanced toward the stairs. He comes down sometimes to ask us questions about counts and inventory. Acts like he's afraid we'll bite him. Before Elena could respond, a harsh voice called out, Ruth, get back to work. The girl, Ruth, flinched and hurried back to the workroom. A moment later, a thin man in a clerk's collar appeared at the top of the stairs. You, applicant. Mr. Webb will see you now. Elena climbed the stairs, each step a deliberate act of will. The clerk led her down a narrow hallway to a door marked private and knocked. Enter, came a rough voice. Cyrus Webb was a large man, running to fat, with cold eyes that assessed Elena like merchandise. He gestured to a chair without preamble. Name? Lena Marsh, Elena said, using the name that had become her armor. Age? 21. Experience? Domestic service, kitchen work, cleaning, laundry. Webb made notes in a ledger. Not the one Elena needed, but seeing him write sparked an idea. Can you read and write? He asked. Yes, sir. His eyebrows rose slightly. Educated service, that's unusual. Why are you seeking placement? Elena had prepared this lie carefully. My last employer died. The estate was sold. I need work quickly. References? Lost in the sale, sir. Everything happened very fast. Webb studied her for a long moment. Elena kept her eyes down, her posture submissive, every inch the desperate servant she'd once been. "I can place you in a household within a week," he said finally. "The fee is £20. "I don't have £20, Elena said. "That's why I need work." "Then you'll work it off here. Standard indenture, 3 months' labor to cover the placement fee, plus room and board. After that, you go to your new employer." 3 months, locked in this building. Elena's skin crawled, but she forced herself to nod. "When can I start?" "Today." Webb stood. "I'll have my clerk draw up the papers. You'll sign, then go downstairs to a..." A commotion erupted from below, shouting, the crash of something breaking. Webb's face darkened. "What in blazes?" He stormed out. The young clerk hurried after him. Elena was left alone in the office. She had perhaps 2 minutes. Elena moved quickly, scanning the room. Ledgers lined the shelves, dozens of them, organized by year. She found the one labeled 1816 and pulled it down, flipping to the summer months. There. July 15th, 1816. Female, age 16. Educated domestic. Received from M. Hartwell via R. Cole. Placed with Thornton Factory, Eastern District. Payment, £800. Elena's hands shook. This was it. Proof of the sale, her name, the payment, everything they needed. She heard footsteps on the stairs. No time to copy it. No time to do anything but... Elena tore the page from the ledger, folded it quickly, and shoved it into her bodice. She replaced the book just as Webb and the clerk returned. "Damned workers breaking equipment," Webb muttered. He looked at Elena with renewed suspicion. "You're still here." "You said you'd have papers drawn up," Elena said calmly, though her heart hammered against the stolen page. Webb grunted and nodded to the clerk. "Get her an indenture form, standard terms." The clerk pulled out a blank contract and began filling it in with shaking hands. Elena watched him, an idea forming. "Excuse me," she said quietly, "but I'd like to know exactly what I'm signing. I can read, but the legal language..." The clerk looked up, seeming almost grateful to be addressed directly. "It's just standard placement terms. The 3 months here, then transfer to..." "Could you show me an example?" Elena interrupted. "Of a previous placement, so I understand what to expect?" The clerk glanced at Webb, who waved impatiently. "Show her one, and be quick about it." The clerk pulled a ledger from the previous year and opened it to a random page. "See? Name, age, terms of placement, receiving household." Elena looked where he pointed and saw dozens of entries, dozens of lives bought and sold, reduced to lines in a book. "Thank you," she said. "That's very clear." She signed the indenture with a false name, her mind racing. She had the evidence she came for. Now she needed to get out. "You'll start in the workroom," Webb said. "Ruth will show you the dormitories. We lock the doors at sundown. Meals are at 6, 12, and 6. Break the rules, and you're out with no placement and no reference. Understand?" "Yes, sir." Webb dismissed her with a wave. Elena descended the stairs, the stolen page burning against her skin. She found Ruth in the workroom and whispered, "I need to get a message out. Is there any way?" "No talking," a supervisor barked. Elena fell silent and took a seat at a sewing machine. She worked mechanically, her mind focused on escape. She'd gotten what she came for, but the front door was guarded and the windows were barred. An hour passed. Then 2. Across the street, Adrian checked his pocket watch for the 20th time. Elena had been inside for over 2 hours, far longer than planned. "We need to go in," he said to Thorne. "And say what? We're looking for our secretary who randomly applied for work?" Thorne shook his head. "We'll only make things worse. She could be in danger." "She's survived 5 years in places like this," Thorne reminded him. "Give her time." Adrian wanted to throttle him. Instead, he stood and crossed to the window, staring at the labor house entrance. Inside, Elena waited until the supervisor left the room to discipline someone in the dormitories. Then she turned to Ruth. "I need to get a message to someone outside. It's urgent." Ruth looked at her like she was mad. "No one gets messages out. We're locked in." "Please. I'll pay you once I'm free. I swear it." Ruth hesitated, then whispered, "The coal delivery comes at 4. If you can get to the cellar, you might be able to slip out when they're loading." It was a desperate plan, but it was something. At 4 o'clock, Elena volunteered to fetch more thread from the storage room. She slipped past the supervisor and headed down instead of up, finding the cellar stairs. The coal delivery was already underway. 2 men hauling sacks through an exterior door that opened directly to the street. The guard was supervising, his back to the stairs. Elena waited until both delivery men were inside, then darted forward and slipped through the open door. She made it 3 steps before someone grabbed her arm. "Running already?" Webb's voice was cold. "I knew you were trouble." Elena's blood turned to ice as Webb dragged her back inside. Webb's grip on Elena's arm was iron as he hauled her back through the cellar door. The coal deliverymen stopped mid-lift, their eyes widening at the scene. The guard rushed forward. "Should I get the constable, Mr. Webb?" he asked. "No need," Webb said, his voice dangerously calm. "Just a girl who doesn't understand her contract yet. Take her upstairs. Lock her in the isolation room until she learns some discipline." Elena's mind raced. The stolen page was still hidden against her skin, but if they searched her— "Please," she said, forcing fear into her voice that wasn't entirely false. "I wasn't running. I thought I heard someone calling my name from the street. I just wanted to look—" "Liars make poor workers," Webb interrupted. He nodded to the guard. "Take her." The guard grabbed her other arm. Elena let herself be pulled toward the stairs, her mind working frantically. She needed to get the evidence to Adrian, needed to let him know she was trapped. Through the still-open coal delivery door, she caught a glimpse of the street, and there, barely visible in the shadows of the building across the way, stood Adrian. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. Elena made a decision. She went limp in the guard's grip, dead weight. He cursed and adjusted his hold. In that instant, Elena twisted and screamed at the top of her lungs. "Fire! Fire in the cellar!" The reaction was instantaneous. The coal delivery men bolted for the door. Workers appeared at the top of the stairs, panicked voices rising. The guard hesitated, confused, his grip loosening slightly. Elena drove her elbow into his stomach and ran. Not toward the door, they'd expect that. Instead, she sprinted up the stairs toward the workroom, shouting, "Fire! Everyone out!" Chaos erupted. Women abandoned their sewing machines and rushed for the exits. The supervisor tried to restore order but was swept aside by the tide of frightened workers. Webb bellowed commands that no one heard over the panic. Elena pushed through the crowd, making her way toward the front entrance. She could see the door, could see freedom. A hand caught her shoulder and spun her around. Webb's face was purple with rage. "You lying little—" Elena pulled the knife from her pocket and pressed it against his wrist. "Let go," she said quietly. Webb's eyes widened. For a moment they stood frozen, surrounded by chaos. Then a voice cut through the noise. "I believe the lady asked you to release her." Adrian stood in the doorway, flanked by Thorne and his 2 guards. His expression was cold enough to freeze blood. Webb looked between Elena and Adrian, calculation flickering across his features. "This woman signed an indenture. She's contracted to—" "She signed under duress," Adrian interrupted. "That contract is void." "Who the hell are you to say what's void?" Webb demanded. Adrian stepped forward, and something in his bearing made Webb step back despite himself. "I'm the Duke of Vale," Adrian said quietly, "and you've just assaulted a woman under my protection. Release her, now." The room had gone silent. Workers huddled against the walls, staring. The guard had drawn his club but looked uncertain. Webb's grip on Elena loosened slightly. "Duke or not, you have no authority here. This is a private business, operating on Crown permits that I can have revoked with a single letter," Adrian said, "and trafficking in human lives, which is a hanging offense. Release her, or I'll have you arrested where you stand." Webb let go. Elena immediately moved to Adrian's side. His hand found hers, squeezed once. Relief and reassurance combined. "This isn't over," Webb said, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. "You can't just walk in here and—" "Actually, I can," Adrian said. "Thorne—" Thorne stepped forward and handed Webb a folded document. "That's a warrant to examine your business records, signed by Magistrate Cornwell this morning. You're required to produce all ledgers documenting worker placements for the past 10 years. Webb's face went ashen. "You have no right. The Crown has every right when investigating human trafficking," Thorne said calmly. You can cooperate, or you can be arrested and we'll seize the records anyway. Your choice." For a long moment, Webb stood frozen. Then his shoulders sagged. "The ledgers are in my office," he said dully. "Excellent," Thorne said. "We'll accompany you." As Thorne and the guards followed Webb upstairs, Adrian turned to Elena. "Are you hurt?" he asked quietly. Elena shook her head. She was trembling now, adrenaline draining away. "I got it," she whispered. "The evidence, it's—" She glanced around at the watching workers and lowered her voice further. "I have the page." Adrian's eyes widened. "How—" "Later," Elena said. Then, louder. "We need to help these women." She turned to the room full of workers who'd been caught in the chaos. They stared at her with expressions ranging from fear to desperate hope. "Is anyone here being held against their will?" Elena asked clearly. Silence. The workers exchanged glances, but no one spoke. "You won't be punished for answering," Adrian said. "I give you my word as a peer of the realm." Still nothing. Elena understood. They'd learned that promises from the powerful meant nothing. "I was one of you," Elena said quietly. 5 years ago, I was sold to a merchant just like Webb. I spent years in factories and households, working until I couldn't stand, eating scraps, sleeping on floors. I know what it's like to be treated as less than human. Now she had their attention. Several women straightened, really looking at her for the first time. "I got out," Elena continued, "and I'm going to make sure the people who did this to me face justice. But I can't do it alone. If any of you were brought here under false pretenses, if you were sold or coerced, if you're being held beyond the terms of your contract, tell me now. I'll help you." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Ruth stepped forward. "My parents sold my indenture to pay their debts," she said, voice shaking. "I was supposed to be here for 1 year. It's been 2, and Webb keeps adding charges to my account. He says I broke equipment, wasted materials. I'll never work it off." Another woman spoke up. "He docks our pay for meals and lodging at rates higher than we earn. It's impossible to save enough to leave." "I tried to leave when my contract ended," a third woman said. "He told me I owed him for training costs and threatened to have me arrested for theft if I didn't sign another contract." More voices joined in, each adding another story of manipulation and abuse. Adrian listened with growing fury while Thorne's guards took notes. Upstairs, Thorne was methodically going through Webb's ledgers with the nervous clerk. "This entry here," Thorne said, pointing. "Female, age 16, from M. Hartwell. Where was she sent?" The clerk checked his records. "Thornton Factory initially, but that factory closed 3 years ago. The workers were redistributed to—" He flipped pages. "Various households? I don't have the specific placements. The old clerk kept those records in a separate log." "Where's that log now?" "I don't know," the clerk said miserably. "When I started, Mr. Webb said the previous clerk had taken many of his personal files when he left." Thorne's eyes narrowed. Convenient. Webb, sitting sullenly in the corner, said nothing. "However," the clerk continued, brightening slightly, "I did find this." He pulled out a separate ledger. "It's the payment record. Every transaction is logged with dates and amounts. If you know what you're looking for, you could trace individual payments." Thorne examined the ledger and allowed himself a small smile. "This will do nicely." Downstairs, Elena was helping organize the workers. With Adrian's backing, she'd convinced them to provide written statements about their treatment. Several were willing to testify if it meant escaping their contracts. "We'll need to find them safe placement," Elena said to Adrian. "They can't stay here, but they have nowhere else to go." "I'll arrange it," Adrian said. "Thorne has contacts with legitimate employment agencies. We'll make sure they're protected." Ruth approached Elena hesitantly. "You really did this? You got away and came back to help us." "I did," Elena said, "though I had help." She glanced at Adrian. "The important thing is that none of you are alone anymore." "Will Webb go to prison?" Ruth asked. "If I have anything to say about it," Adrian said. "But we need your testimony to make sure the charges stick." Ruth nodded slowly. "Then you'll have it." By the time Thorne returned with an armload of ledgers, a crowd had gathered outside the labor house. Curious onlookers, other workers from Webb's factories, even a reporter from the local newspaper who'd heard about the commotion. Adrian took charge with the ease of someone used to authority. He arranged for the workers to be temporarily housed at a respectable boarding house, paid for by his own funds. He had Thorne hire a solicitor to review their contracts and identify which ones were legally void. And he made sure the reporter understood that a duke was personally investigating labor abuses in Ashford. By sunset, Webb's labor house stood empty and locked, with a notice posted on the door that it was under investigation by Crown authorities. Elena watched from the carriage as they drove away, the stolen page still hidden against her skin. "Are you all right?" Adrian asked quietly. Elena nodded slowly. "I walked back into that place thinking I'd be terrified, that it would break me all over again, but instead," she looked at him, "instead I felt angry and powerful, because this time I wasn't helpless." "You were never helpless," Adrian said. "You survived. That takes more strength than people realize." "Survival isn't the same as fighting back," Elena said. "Today I fought back, and we won." Adrian squeezed her hand. "We're not done yet. The Hartwells still need to answer for what they did." "I know," Elena said. She pulled the folded page from her bodice and handed it to him. "But now we have proof." Adrian unfolded the page carefully. In the fading light, he could just make out the entry. Elena's name, the payment, the damning details of her sale. "This is it," he breathed. "This is everything we need." "Combined with the payment ledgers Thorne found," Elena said, "we can trace every transaction from my stepmother to Webb to the factory. We have the chain of custody." "The exhumation order should come through within a few days," Adrian said. "Once we prove the coffin is empty, we have them on fraud. With this, we add human trafficking. They won't be able to wriggle out of it." Elena leaned back against the carriage seat, exhaustion finally catching up to her. "What happens after? After they're convicted?" "That depends," Adrian said carefully. "What do you want to happen?" Elena was quiet for a long moment. "I want to see my father's face when he realizes I survived. I want Marguerite to know that all her planning and cruelty came to nothing. I want them to lose everything they stole from me." "And after that?" Adrian pressed. "After justice is served?" Elena turned to look at him. In the dim carriage, his features were shadowed, but she could see the question in his eyes, the hope he was trying not to show. "I don't know," she said honestly. 5 years ago, I thought I knew exactly what my life would be. Then it all burned down. Now I'm building something new, and I'm not sure what shape it will take." "That's fair," Adrian said, though she could hear the disappointment beneath his careful tone. "But," Elena continued, "I know I want you in it, however that looks." Adrian's breath caught. "Elena, don't," she said gently. "Don't make promises or proposals yet. Let me finish destroying the people who tried to erase me. Let me prove they were wrong about who I am. Then we'll talk about the future." Adrian nodded slowly. "I can wait." "I know," Elena said and squeezed his hand. "You've been waiting 5 years. What's a few more weeks?" They rode in comfortable silence for a while. Then Elena spoke again. "Those women at Webb's labor house, they reminded me of who I was, powerless, afraid, certain that nothing would ever change." "You changed their situation today," Adrian said. "We changed it," Elena corrected, "but it's not enough. Webb is one merchant in one town. There are dozens like him, maybe hundreds, operating with impunity because no one cares what happens to poor girls with no families." Adrian heard the determination in her voice. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that after we destroy the Hartwells, we shouldn't stop there," Elena said. "We should use the evidence we've gathered to push for legal reforms. Stricter regulations on labor contracts, penalties for merchants who abuse their workers, protection for people who can't protect themselves." "That's ambitious," Adrian said. "It could take years." "I have years," Elena said. "I spent 5 years surviving. I can spend the next 5 making sure other girls don't have to." Adrian looked at her with something like awe. "You're remarkable." Elena's smile was bitter. "I'm angry. There's a difference." "You're both," Adrian said, "and you're going to change the world." They returned to Blackthorn Hall 3 days later. The exhumation order had arrived in their absence, signed by a magistrate and scheduled for the following week. Catherine Winters met them in Adrian's study with news. "The Hartwells know we're investigating," she said without preamble. "Richard Cole contacted them immediately after his confession, despite your warnings. They've hired a very expensive solicitor from London." "Let them," Adrian said. "We have the evidence now." "Yes, but they're preparing a defense," Catherine warned. "Their solicitor has already sent word that they plan to argue Elena went willingly into service to escape an engagement she didn't want, that she's fabricating abuse to extort money from you." Elena's jaw tightened. "I expected that." "There's more," Catherine said. "They're claiming Elena is mentally unstable, that she had episodes of hysteria as a child and may not be competent to testify." "That's ridiculous," Adrian said sharply. "It's also difficult to disprove," Catherine said. "Character witnesses could argue either way. We need something incontrovertible." "The empty coffin," Elena said. "They can't explain that away." "They'll try," Catherine warned. "Their story will be that you had a genuine fever, appeared to die, were buried in good faith, and then somehow revived or were mistaken for dead. Medical error rather than deliberate fraud." "No one will believe that," Adrian said. "Juries have believed stranger things," Catherine said, "especially when the alternative is believing a lord and lady are capable of selling their own daughter." Elena stood and walked to the window, her mind working. What if we had testimony from someone inside the household, someone who witnessed the planning? "All the servants were dismissed or paid off," Catherine said, "and 5 years is a long time. Memories fade and loyalties shift." "Not all of them," Elena said slowly. She turned back. "There was a housekeeper, Mrs. Brennan. She'd worked for my mother, stayed on after the remarriage. She tried to help me when I was sick, but Marguerite forbade her from entering my room." "Where is she now?" Catherine asked. "I don't know, but if she's alive, she'd remember, and she hated Marguerite." Thorne, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. "I'll find her." "There's one more thing," Catherine said. "The exhumation is public record. Once it happens, the story will break. Every newspaper in the country will be covering the trial of a duke's supposedly dead lover. Are you both prepared for that level of scrutiny?" Elena and Adrian exchanged glances. "I've spent 5 years invisible," Elena said. "I think I can handle being seen." The exhumation was scheduled for dawn on a cold October morning. Adrian had tried to convince Elena not to attend, but she'd refused to stay away. "It's my grave," she said simply. "I should be there when they open it." A small crowd gathered in the churchyard at Hartwell Village. The magistrate, a physician, witnesses required by law, and a handful of curious onlookers who'd heard rumors. Elena stood apart, wrapped in a cloak, watching as workers dug into the earth that supposedly held her remains. Lord Edmund Hartwell arrived with his solicitor just as the coffin was being raised. He looked older than Elena remembered, thinner, with lines of worry etched deep around his mouth. When he saw Adrian, his face went pale. "Your Grace," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "I must protest this violation of my daughter's resting place. Surely whatever questions you have could be—" "Save it," Adrian said coldly. "You'll have your chance to explain in court." The coffin was set on the ground. The magistrate looked to the physician. "Dr. Matthews, if you would." The physician knelt and carefully pried open the lid. Elena heard her father's sharp intake of breath. Inside the coffin were stones. Dozens of them, roughly the size and weight of a body wrapped in cloth. No bones. No remains. Just stones. The magistrate's face was grim. "Lord Hartwell, it appears you have some explaining to do." Edmund Hartwell stared at the open coffin, his face ashen. There must be some mistake. The burial was properly conducted." "With a coffin full of rocks," the magistrate said sharply. "That's not a mistake, my lord. That's fraud." Edmund's solicitor stepped forward. "My client will need time to investigate this irregularity. Clearly, something has gone wrong, but without more information—" "We have more information," Adrian said. He nodded to Thorne, who handed the magistrate a folder. "Documentation of the false death certificate. Financial records showing payments to the doctor and others, and testimony from Richard Cole, your client's steward, detailing exactly how the fraud was arranged." The magistrate reviewed the documents, his expression growing darker. "Lord Hartwell, I'm placing you under arrest pending a full investigation into fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. This is outrageous, Edmund's solicitor protested. You can't arrest a peer on such flimsy— I can and I am, the magistrate said. He gestured to the constables he'd brought. Take him. As the constables moved forward, Edmund Hartwell's eyes swept the small crowd and landed on Elena. For a moment he didn't recognize her. Then understanding dawned and his face went white as snow. Elena, he whispered. She pulled back her hood, letting him see her clearly for the first time in 5 years. Hello, Father, she said quietly. Edmund stumbled backward as though she were a ghost. No, you're dead. You're buried in a coffin full of stones, Elena finished. Did you really think I wouldn't survive? That you could erase me so easily? I didn't. It wasn't— Edmund couldn't seem to form a complete sentence. His eyes darted between Elena and the open coffin, his mind visibly fracturing under the weight of what he was seeing. Take him, the magistrate repeated. As the constables led Edmund away, Elena felt something shift inside her chest. Not satisfaction exactly, not even relief, just a quiet certainty that the first domino had fallen. Adrian moved to her side. Are you all right? Elena nodded slowly. I thought I'd feel more angry or vindicated or something, but mostly I just feel tired. It's not over yet, Adrian reminded her gently. I know, Elena said. She watched her father being loaded into a wagon, his solicitor arguing futilely with the magistrate. But it started. The truth is out now. They can't bury it again. The story broke the next day. Every newspaper in this country ran some version of the headline, Duke's dead lover found alive, shocking fraud uncovered. The details grew more sensational with each retelling, but the core facts remained. A noble family had faked a death to sell their own daughter. Public opinion was swift and brutal. The Hartwells were denounced from pulpits and in Parliament. Marguerite Hartwell was arrested within days of her husband. Their daughters were shunned by society. But the trial was still weeks away, and Catherine warned them not to celebrate too soon. They'll fight, she said. They have nothing left to lose. Expect them to throw everything they can at us. She was right. The Hartwells' defense was vicious. They produced witnesses who claimed Elena had been wild and disobedient. They argued she'd run away and was now fabricating abuse for attention and money. They even suggested Adrian had orchestrated the entire scheme to extort funds from a struggling noble family. Each accusation stung, but Elena endured. She sat through depositions, answered invasive questions, and allowed her character to be dissected by strangers. And then Thorne found Mrs. Brennan. The former housekeeper was living in a cottage in the countryside, supported by a small pension from Elena's late mother's family. She was in her 70s now, frail but sharp-minded. When Thorne explained why he was there, she wept. I tried to help her, she said. When Lady Marguerite locked her in that room, I tried to get in. But they dismissed me. Said I was interfering with a family matter. She looked at Thorne with fierce eyes. Is Elena really alive? She is, Thorne said gently. And she's asking for your help. Mrs. Brennan's testimony was devastating. She described in detail how Marguerite had forbidden anyone from treating Elena's fever, how she'd overheard conversations about solving the Elena problem, how she'd been paid off and threatened with ruin if she spoke about what she'd seen. Combined with Cole's confession, the ledgers from Webb, and the evidence of the empty coffin, the case became unassailable. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Elena testified on the 6th day, standing before a packed courtroom and recounting 5 years of suffering in a voice that never wavered. When she finished, the silence was absolute. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. Guilty on all counts. Lord Edmund Hartwell was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Lady Marguerite received 20. Dr. Thorne lost his medical license and received 10 years. Richard Cole, in exchange for his cooperation, received 5 years and was required to forfeit all his assets. As the sentences were read, Elena sat in the gallery between Adrian and Catherine, her hands folded in her lap. How do you feel? Catherine whispered. Elena considered the question. Like I can finally breathe, she said. That evening, back at Blackthorn Hall, Adrian found Elena in the library, She was sitting in the window seat watching the sun set over the grounds she'd once scrubbed as a servant. "The press is calling you brave," he said, joining her. "Heroic, even." "I don't feel heroic," Elena said. "I feel exhausted." "That's allowed," Adrian said gently. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Elena spoke. "I've been thinking about what comes next," she said. Adrian's heart quickened, but he kept his voice neutral. "And?" "I want to establish a foundation," Elena said, "for people trapped in situations like mine. Legal support, safe housing, education. I want to use my inheritance, what's left of it after the courts sort through the mess, to help others escape." "That's a worthy goal," Adrian said. "And," Elena continued, turning to face him, "I want to accept your proposal, if it's still open." Adrian's breath caught. "Elena, I know I said to wait," she interrupted, "but I've been waiting for 5 years to have my life back. I don't want to wait anymore." She reached for his hand. "You've stood by me through all of this. You've fought for me, believed in me, given me the space to be angry and broken and whole all at once. I love you for that. I've always loved you." Adrian pulled her close, his voice thick. "I never stopped loving you, even when I thought you were gone." "I know," Elena said softly. "So yes, if you'll still have me, the real me, scars and all, then yes, I'll marry you." Adrian kissed her then, gentle and reverent, like she was something precious he'd thought lost forever. When they finally pulled apart, Elena smiled, a real smile, the first Adrian had seen since she was 16. "We should probably plan a wedding," she said. "Tomorrow," Adrian agreed. "Tonight, let's just be here." And so they sat together as darkness fell, two people who'd survived impossible odds and found their way back to each other. The girl who'd been erased had rewritten her story, and this time she'd written herself a happy ending. The morning after Elena's acceptance, Adrian woke to find her already dressed and standing at his study window, watching the household staff begin their daily routines. "You're up early," he said, joining her. "I couldn't sleep," Elena admitted. "I kept thinking about them." She nodded toward the servants crossing the courtyard below. "About how many are invisible, just like I was." Adrian slipped his arm around her waist. "You want to do something about it." It wasn't a question. He knew her too well now. "The foundation I mentioned," Elena said. "I want to start immediately, not in a year, not after the wedding, now." "Then we'll start now," Adrian said simply. Elena turned to face him. "It won't be simple. We'll need premises, staff, legal framework, and funding. My inheritance is still tied up in court proceedings." "Use mine," Adrian said. "Adrian, I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking, I'm offering." He cupped her face gently. "Your fight is my fight, Elena. It always has been." Elena's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. "Then we'll need to move quickly. There are women still trapped in places like Webb's labor house. Every day we delay is another day they suffer." Adrian recognized that fierce determination. "What do you need?" "First, we need to purchase a building, somewhere large enough to house at least 20 women while they recover and find legitimate work. Second, we need solicitors who understand labor law and can review contracts. Third, we need connections to honest employers who'll hire women with questionable work histories." "Catherine can handle the legal aspects," Adrian said. "And I know several factory owners who've been looking for ways to reform labor practices. They'd welcome trained workers." "What about the women still at Webb's labor house?" Elena asked. "We gave them temporary housing, but they need permanent solutions." "Then let's start with them," Adrian said. "They're already willing to testify about labor abuses. They could be the first residents of your foundation." Elena's smile was swift and genuine. "Our foundation. If you're funding it, you're part of it." "Our foundation," Adrian agreed. Within a week, they'd purchased a large townhouse on the respectable edge of the city, close enough to employment opportunities but far enough from scandal. Elena threw herself into preparations with an energy that amazed everyone around her. She interviewed potential staff, reviewed applications from women seeking help, and worked with Catherine to draft legal documents that would protect the foundation's residents. The first residents arrived on a gray November morning, 23 women from Webb's labor house, plus 6 more who'd heard about the foundation through word of mouth. They came with everything they owned in threadbare bags, their faces showing hope and suspicion in equal measure. Elena greeted them personally at the door. Imuki. "Welcome to Hartford House," she said. The name was deliberate, a reclamation of her mother's maiden name. "You're safe here. No one will force you to work, lock you in, or take your wages. This is your home until you're ready to leave it." Ruth, the girl from Webb's labor house, stepped forward. "What do you want from us?" It was the question Elena had been expecting. "I want you to heal," she said simply, "to learn skills that will help you find good employment, to remember that you're worth more than how you've been treated. And when you're ready, I want you to help other women the way we're helping you." "That's all?" Ruth asked skeptically. "That's all," Elena confirmed. "Though if you want to share your stories, if you want to testify about labor abuses, or help us identify other merchants like Webb, we'll support that too. But it's your choice, always your choice." The women settled in slowly, testing the boundaries of their new freedom. Some adapted quickly, grateful for clean beds and regular meals. Others struggled, years of abuse having taught them to distrust kindness. Elena understood. She spent hours talking with residents, listening to their stories, helping them navigate a world that had been hostile for so long. One evening, she found a young woman named Sarah crying in the library. "I don't know how to do this," Sarah said. "How to be free. Every time I make a choice, I'm terrified it's wrong." Elena sat beside her. "You know what helped me?" Sarah shook her head. "I started small," Elena said. "I chose what to eat for breakfast, what book to read, what dress to wear, simple things. And each small choice reminded me that I could choose, that my life was mine. What if I choose wrong?" "Then you choose differently next time," Elena said gently. "That's the beautiful thing about freedom. You get to keep choosing." Sarah wiped her eyes. "Did it get easier for you?" Elena considered the question honestly. "Some days yes, some days no. But the hard days are mine now. That makes them bearable." By December, Hartford House had become a small miracle. The residents had formed a community, supporting each other through nightmares and setbacks. Several had found employment with factory owners Adrian recommended, positions with fair wages and humane conditions. Others were learning trades through apprenticeships the foundation arranged. But not everyone approved. The backlash started in the society pages. Anonymous letters to newspapers questioned Elena's motives. Was she really helping these women, or exploiting their suffering for attention? Some suggested she was running a house of ill repute under the guise of charity. Others claimed she was undermining the natural social order by encouraging servants to abandon their positions. The attacks grew more personal. One particularly vicious editorial suggested that Elena's years in service had damaged her morally, making her unfit to marry into the highest ranks of society. Adrian wanted to sue for libel, but Elena stopped him. "Let them write what they want," she said. "We're not doing this for their approval. They're trying to destroy your reputation." "My reputation was destroyed 5 years ago when my family declared me dead," Elena said dryly. "I'm not afraid of gossip." But the whispers did affect their wedding plans. Adrian's family solicitor strongly advised postponing the marriage until the scandal died down. "The duchy has a reputation to maintain," he said carefully. "If your grace were to marry now, while these rumors are circulating, then we'll weather the rumors together," Adrian interrupted. "The wedding proceeds as planned." Elena touched his arm. "Are you sure? I don't want you to sacrifice." "I'm not sacrificing anything," Adrian said firmly. "I'm marrying the woman I love. Society can adapt or not. I don't particularly care." The wedding was set for Christmas Eve. Small, private, held in the chapel at Blackthorn Hall. They invited only close friends and the residents of Hartford House. 2 days before the ceremony, an unexpected visitor arrived. Marguerite's eldest daughter, Cynthia, appeared at Hartford House asking to speak with Elena. The staff wanted to turn her away, but Elena agreed to see her. Cynthia looked nothing like the confident debutante Elena remembered. She was thin, pale, wearing a dress that had seen better days. Her hands trembled as Elena gestured for her to sit. "I don't expect forgiveness," Cynthia began. "I don't deserve it. But I needed to tell you that I'm sorry." Elena waited, saying nothing. I knew, Cynthia continued, her voice breaking. I knew what my mother was planning. I heard the conversations. I saw you locked in your room, and I did nothing. Why are you here now? Elena asked, her voice carefully neutral. Because everything fell apart, Cynthia said. My mother and your father are in prison. My sister and I have nothing. We've been shunned by everyone we knew. I can't find work because no one will hire us. She looked at Elena with desperate eyes. I know I have no right to ask, but you want me to help you, Elena finished. Cynthia nodded miserably. I'll do anything. Work as a servant, scrub floors, whatever you need. I can't survive like this. And I can't stop thinking about how this is what you went through, what we put you through. Elena studied the broken woman before her. 5 years ago, Cynthia had ignored her suffering, had benefited from it even. Every part of Elena wanted to turn her away, to let her experience the same helplessness and desperation, but that would make her no better than Marguerite. Hartford House has a waiting list, Elena said finally, but we also need staff. If you're willing to work, truly work, I can offer you a position as an assistant to our residence coordinator. Cynthia's head shot up. You'd hire me? After everything? I'd give you a chance to prove you've changed, Elena corrected. The salary is modest, the work is hard, and if you mistreat any of our residents, you'll be dismissed immediately. Understood? Yes, Cynthia whispered. Yes, I understand. Thank you. Thank you. After Cynthia left, Adrian found Elena in the sitting room, staring into the fire. That was generous of you, he said. Was it? Elena asked. Or was it selfish? I wanted to see if she'd really changed, if people can be redeemed. Can they? Elena was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, but I survived because people gave me chances. You, Mrs. Copeland, even Ruth at Webb's Labor House. Maybe Cynthia deserves a chance too. You're a better person than I am, Adrian said. I would have sent her away. You probably should have, Elena admitted. But I keep thinking about Sarah's question, how to be free. Part of that is choosing mercy when you don't have to, choosing to be better than the people who hurt you. Adrian pulled her close. Have I mentioned lately that I'm in awe of you? Elena laughed softly. You might have mentioned it. Christmas Eve arrived with fresh snow blanketing Blackthorn Hall. The chapel was decorated simply, evergreen boughs and white candles, nothing ostentatious. The guests filled only the first few pews. Elena wore a dress of ivory silk, far simpler than what a duchess would typically wear. She'd chosen it deliberately. She wanted to be married as herself, not as some society ideal. Catherine Winters stood as her witness. Thorne stood for Adrian. The residents of Hartford House filled the remaining seats, some of them crying openly. The ceremony was brief. No lengthy sermons or elaborate rituals. Just two people making promises they intended to keep. When Adrian said, I do, his voice was steady and sure. When Elena said, I do, she felt something unlock in her chest, a final door opening to a future she'd thought lost forever. They kissed to quiet applause, and then they were married. The small reception was held in Blackthorn Hall's dining room. Elena had insisted on inviting the household staff, many of whom had worked alongside her when she'd been invisible. Some looked uncomfortable at first, unsure how to treat a servant who'd become a duchess. But Elena moved among them easily, thanking them by name, asking about their families. Mrs. Copeland, the head housekeeper, approached with tears in her eyes. I should have known, she said. I should have seen. How could you? Elena asked gently. I was very good at being invisible. You're visible now, Mrs. Copeland said, and I'm proud to serve in your household. Our household, Elena corrected, glancing at Adrian across the room. And I have a favor to ask? Mrs. Copeland straightened. Anything, Your Grace. I'd like to review our household employment contracts, make sure they're fair, that our staff is properly compensated, and I'd like to establish a fund for any servant who wants to leave service and learn a different trade. Mrs. Copeland's eyes widened. Your Grace, that's extraordinary. It's overdue, Elena said, and it's just the beginning. Later that evening, after the guests had departed and the house had quieted, Adrian found Elena in the library. She was sitting in the window seat, the same spot where they'd sat after the trial. Happy? He asked, joining her. Elena considered the question. Content, she said finally. Happy feels too simple for what I'm feeling. What are you feeling? Like I've come full circle, Elena said. 5 years ago, I scrubbed these floors. Tonight, I danced on them as a duchess. But I'm still the same person, just different versions of her. Which version do you prefer? Adrian asked. Elena smiled. The one who survived long enough to become both. They sat in comfortable silence, watching snow fall outside the window. Then Elena spoke again. I've been thinking about expanding Hartford House. There are women all over the country trapped in situations like I was. We could open locations in other cities, create a network of safe houses. That would require significant resources, Adrian said, but we could do it. And I want to push for legislative reform, Elena continued. Stronger protections for workers, penalties for merchants who abuse contracts, requirements for regular inspections of labor houses. You're going to make enemies in Parliament, Adrian warned. I've already made enemies, Elena said. At least this way they'll be enemies worth making. Adrian laughed. When do we start? After our honeymoon, Elena said. You did promise me 2 weeks in the countryside with no responsibilities. I did, Adrian agreed. And I always keep my promises to you. Elena turned to face him fully. I know. That's why I love you. They left for their honeymoon the next morning, traveling to a cottage in the northern hills where no one knew them and newspapers couldn't reach. For 2 weeks, they were simply Adrian and Elena. No titles, no expectations, no ghosts of the past. They walked through snow-covered woods, read by the fire, and talked about everything and nothing. Elena taught Adrian to cook simple meals, a skill she'd learned in servitude that he'd never needed. Adrian taught Elena to ride properly, not the side saddle method society demanded, but the practical seat she'd always wanted to learn. I feel like I'm learning who you are all over again, Adrian said one evening as they sat before the fire. I'm learning who I am too, Elena admitted. For 5 years, I was whoever I needed to be to survive. Now, I get to choose. And who are you choosing to be? Elena smiled. Elena, someone who doesn't waste the second chance she's been given. They returned to Blackthorn Hall in January to find Hartford House thriving. The residents had organized themselves into committees, one for employment placement, one for legal advocacy, one for outreach to other women in need. Cynthia, to everyone's surprise, had proven to be a dedicated worker, throwing herself into the foundation's mission with genuine commitment. She's trying to atone, Ruth told Elena. She knows she can never undo what her mother did, but she's trying to do better. Elena watched Cynthia help a new resident fill out employment applications, her manner patient and kind. Maybe people could change. Maybe redemption was possible. The legislative push began in February. Adrian used his seat in Parliament to introduce a bill regulating labor contracts and requiring inspections of labor houses. The opposition was fierce. Factory owners and merchants argued it would destroy their businesses, that workers would become lazy and entitled. But Elena had prepared for this. She organized testimony from Hartford House residents, each woman sharing her story of abuse and exploitation. She compiled evidence of fraud, unsafe conditions, and wage theft. And she stood before Parliament herself, the first woman to address the chamber in years, and made the case that couldn't be ignored. You've heard the arguments about economics, she said, her voice clear and unwavering. About the cost of regulation, the burden on business. But I'm here to tell you about the cost of doing nothing. She held up a small portrait, the miniature she'd painted of Adrian when she was 16, kept hidden through 5 years of servitude. This is what I carried with me through factories and labor houses and years of invisibility, a reminder that I was once someone who mattered. Do you know how many women lose even that? How many forget they're human because the system treats them as tools? The chamber was silent. The bill before you isn't about economics, Elena continued. It's about whether we as a nation believe that all people deserve basic dignity, whether a girl's worth is measured by her birth or her humanity. I'm standing here because I survived a system designed to erase me. But how many didn't survive? How many are still trapped, waiting for someone to see them? She looked around the chamber, meeting eyes, refusing to be dismissed. You have the power to see them now. The question is whether you'll choose to. The debate lasted for weeks, but in the end, the bill passed, narrowly, but it passed. New regulations required labor houses to be inspected quarterly, contracts to be reviewed by independent arbiters, and workers to have legal recourse against abuse. It wasn't everything Elena had hoped for, but it was a beginning. The night the bill passed, Hartford House celebrated. The residents gathered in the common room, reading the newspaper accounts, hardly believing that their testimonies had changed law. "We did this," Sarah said, her voice full of wonder. "We actually did this." "You did this," Elena corrected. "You were brave enough to speak." "You gave us the platform," Ruth said. "Before Hartford House, who would have listened to us?" Elena looked around the room at the faces of women who'd reclaimed their lives. Some would leave soon, having found employment and homes of their own. Others would stay longer, needing more time to heal. And new women would arrive, seeking the same salvation. "This is just the beginning," Elena said. "We've changed the law. Now we change the culture. We make sure every woman knows she has worth, has options, has a voice." The applause was deafening. Spring came to Blackthorn Hall with an explosion of color. The gardens Elena had once maintained as a servant now bloomed under her direction as Duchess. She'd hired several Hartford House residents as gardeners, giving them honest work and watching them flourish in the sunlight and soil. One morning in April, Elena stood in the garden and realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd had a nightmare about the cellar. The memories were still there. They would always be there, but they no longer controlled her. Adrian found her among the roses, her hands dirty from planting. "Catherine just sent word," he said. "Parliament is considering your proposal for government-funded worker education programs." Elena's face lit up. "Really? Really? Your testimony made an impression. Several lords want to discuss expansion of Hartford House model to other cities." "We'll need more funding," Elena said immediately, her mind already racing through logistics. "And trained staff and—" Adrian laughed and pulled her close, dirt and all. "We'll figure it out. We always do." Elena wrapped her arms around him, breathing in the scent of roses and spring and possibility. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Taking on all of this? The foundation, the political battles, the scandal?" "Not for a second," Adrian said firmly. "Do you regret coming back, fighting instead of staying hidden?" Elena thought about the girl she'd been, scrubbing floors in this very house, invisible and afraid. Then she thought about who she'd become: a duchess, an advocate, a survivor who turned her pain into purpose. "No," she said. "I don't regret any of it." They stood together in the garden as morning sun broke through the clouds, warming the earth and everything growing in it. Around them, Blackthorn Hall bustled with life. Servants who were fairly paid, residents from Hartford House learning new skills. A household built on dignity rather than hierarchy. 6 months later, Elena stood in a newly opened Hartford House location in the eastern provinces, the same region where she'd first been sent to a factory. The building was larger than the original, funded by donations from reformed factory owners and sympathetic members of Parliament. The ribbon-cutting ceremony drew a crowd: reporters, politicians, former laborers, and curious citizens, all gathered to witness what many called a revolution in labor reform. Elena stood before them, no longer afraid of being seen. "5 years ago, I was brought to this region in chains," she said. "I was told I was worthless, disposable, invisible. Today I stand before you as proof that they were wrong." She gestured to the building behind her. "This house exists because women refused to stay invisible, because they spoke their truths and demanded better. It exists because people with power chose to use it for good rather than exploitation." She looked at Adrian standing in the crowd with quiet pride. "It exists because love and justice are stronger than cruelty and greed, and it will continue to exist as long as there are people who need sanctuary and people willing to provide it." The applause was thunderous, but what Elena heard loudest was the sound of hope, in the faces of women lining up for help, in the voices of reformers planning the next steps, in the rustling of change sweeping through a society that had been static for too long. That evening, alone in their room at a local inn, Adrian asked Elena the question that had been on his mind. Are you happy now? Truly? Elena thought about happiness, what it meant, what it cost, what it looked like after everything she'd survived. I'm not the kind of happy I imagined when I was 16, she said honestly. That girl wanted a simple life, marriage, children, quiet contentment. I'm not sure I can have simple anymore. What do you have instead? Elena smiled. Purpose. And love. And the knowledge that I took the worst thing that ever happened to me and turned it into something that helps others. That's better than simple happiness. That's meaningful. Adrian pulled her close. You're remarkable. Have I mentioned that? Once or twice, Elena said, laughing, but I'll never tire of hearing it. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, two people who'd found their way through darkness to something brighter. A year after their wedding, on a bright December morning, Elena stood in the chapel at Blackthorn Hall, holding her newborn daughter. The christening was small, just close friends and Hartford House residents. As she looked down at her daughter's face, Elena thought about the legacy she was leaving. Not just money or property or a title, but a world slightly better than the one she'd been born into. A world where a girl's worth wasn't determined by her birth, or her beauty, or her obedience, but by her inherent humanity. What will you name her? Catherine asked. Elena looked at Adrian, who nodded encouragingly. Hope, Elena said softly. Her name is Hope. Because that's what her survival had become. Not just her own second chance, but proof that even in the darkest circumstances, hope could survive, could grow, could change the world. The chapel filled with quiet celebration. Residents from Hartford House surrounded the new family, women who'd reclaimed their lives standing witness to new life beginning. Sarah held little hope for a moment, tears streaming down her face. She'll grow up in a different world than we did, she said. Because of you. Because of all of us, Elena corrected. Every woman who spoke up, who testified, who refused to stay invisible, they're the reason she'll have choices we didn't. As the sun set over Blackthorn Hall, Elena walked through the corridors with her daughter in her arms, past the very floors she'd scrubbed as a servant, through the halls where she'd been invisible, into the library where she'd reclaimed her voice. Adrian joined her, wrapping his arms around them both. She's beautiful, he said softly, just like her mother. She's free, Elena corrected. That's more important than beautiful. They stood together in the fading light, a family forged from survival and love and stubborn refusal to be erased. Around them, Blackthorn Hall hummed with life, servants laughing in the kitchens, residents from Hartford House studying in the library, a household built on dignity and hope. Elena thought about the girl she'd been, terrified in a cellar, convinced she'd been forgotten. If she could go back, what would she tell that girl? That she would survive, that she would fight, that she would take every bit of pain and transform it into purpose, that she would stand in this very house as a duchess and a mother and a force for change, that she would prove, once and for all, that the girl they tried to erase was too strong to stay buried. But Elena couldn't go back. She could only move forward, carrying that frightened girl's memory like a torch, lighting the way for others still trapped in darkness. What are you thinking? Adrian asked. Elena smiled, pressing a kiss to Hope's forehead. I'm thinking, she said, that the best revenge is living well, and loving well, and using every day you're given to make sure no one else is erased the way you were. That's not revenge, Adrian said softly. That's redemption. Maybe they're the same thing, Elena said. She looked out the window at the grounds of Blackthorn Hall, at Hartford House visible in the distance, at the world she'd helped reshape through sheer force of will and refusal to surrender. The girl who'd been declared dead had indeed rewritten her destiny, not through being rescued, but through surviving long enough for truth and love and justice to catch up to the lies. And in her arms, a new generation slept peacefully, inheriting a world slightly better than the one before. That, Elena thought, was worth every scar, every tear, every moment of darkness, because she hadn't just survived. She'd won,